All right, let's put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 500 likes for the show. So smash the like button, subscribe to our show, and also a programming note. Each and every Monday and Thursday, Inside College Basketball Now will be coming to you with live episodes at 1 o'clock Eastern. The Monday editions, as we are seeing today, will be live on CBS Sports Network. But if you can't be with us on Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern, get with us on Apple and Spotify during your commute home, during your early morning workout. We need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now, and we need you to be all you can be. And in addition to those shows, on Mondays and Thursdays, Inside College Basketball Now will be coming to you each and every week with additional episodes featuring exclusive interviews with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. Tuesday at 8 a.m. Eastern on YouTube, I will chat with Tennessee head coach Rick Barnes. The Vols have won 6 of 7. But as always, when we get going on a Monday, we know there is a lot of meat on the bone to get to, and that is why, as always, we get going with 3 big things. And the first big thing I want to get to revolves around a very, very somber Sunday on a lot of levels in the Big 12. Now, the Big 12 has separated itself as a basketball conference over the last couple of weeks. The games featuring the teams at the top of the conference are second to none. It feels like every 2 or 3 days we have an Elite 8 caliber tilt. And later in the show, I'm going to highlight plenty of the good when it comes to the Big 12. But on Sunday, there wasn't much good for the conference. There were 2 headlines that were disappointing, frustrating, and all around baffling when you look at one of them, and that's where I'm going to start. Kansas State made the decision on Sunday to part ways with Jerome Tang after about 4 seasons as head coach. Tang made major headlines in his first season with the Wildcats, taking Kansas State all the way to the Elite 8 of the NCAA tournament in 2023, where Kansas State lost to Florida Atlantic. The second year for Kansas State did not end in the NCAA tournament. As I said on last week's show, I firmly believe that year 2 for Jerome Tang would have ended in the NCAA tournament if Kansas State did not lose Naquan Tomlin in the middle of the season. And then last year, Kansas State made a big haul in the transfer portal, headlined by Coleman Hawkins. That didn't lead to the NCAA tournament either. There was a major roster turnover again this year. Kansas State did pick up P.J. Haggerty, an All-American guard in the transfer portal. But the Wildcats did not obviously have the type of season that many people envision. Now, this is a different time in college athletics. There is a lot of money invested at the power conference level, not just on a coaching staff, not just on a head coach, but the resources now that people are putting into their rosters is serious, serious money. The best players in college basketball are making millions of dollars. The great role players in college basketball are making millions of dollars, but just not as much as the best players in college basketball. And other players are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. I grew up the son of 2 teachers. There are players right now in college basketball that are marginal players who are making significantly more money than I ever saw either one of my parents make. I'm talking about $700,000, $800,000 a year for guys who are their 9th, 10th men. It is unfound right now. It is unfathomable what is going on with these salaries in college basketball. But with that comes obviously great responsibility and more pressure if you are a head coach. And if you are a head coach in this climate, and if you are constantly being responsible to win and win at the highest levels of college basketball, you are dealing right now with this dynamic. You could have a really, really good player and he could transfer. You could have a player who doesn't play at all and he could transfer. And with that said, it is your responsibility to put together a team on an annual basis that has a chance to go to the NCAA tournament and advance. Now, over the last 2 years, that wasn't obviously the formula and what was reflected at Kansas State. And probably the worst moment during these last 2 years was last week when Cincinnati, a team that's not near the NCAA tournament, went to Bramlage Coliseum and beat Kansas State by 29 points. If Kansas State wanted to part ways with Jerome Tang because of the way that things transpired the last 2 years, I understand it. But when the school came out and said that they were going to fire him for cause because of comments that were made at a press conference last week when he was obviously visibly disappointed, is something I just don't understand. But this right now is the new playbook. This is the playbook when coaches have an exorbitant amount of money left on their contract. This is the playbook that many schools will try and implement. We saw it at UConn with Kevin Ollie. We saw it at St. John's with Mike Anderson, and it's real simple. Jerome Tang has over $18.5 million on his buyout from Kansas State. Obviously, Kansas State is going to have to find money to continue funding its basketball program after this season, hire a new head coach, and potentially pay a buyout for a sitting head coach in addition to that. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to save money on the buyout for the coach who they are parting ways with. And this is how the formula works, and I've seen it several times at this level. If somebody's owed $10 million, the school says, well, we're going to fire you for cause, so you're going to get nothing. And then the person who's being fired might say, well, wait, I can't get nothing. And I say, okay, how's $3 million sound? And if you don't like it, we're going to go to court, and we're going to talk to you in 14 months. And between now and then, all you're going to do is rack up bills with a legal counsel. That's all that's going to happen. But Jerome Tang, I have known a long time. Jerome Tang is somebody I have known for close to 15 years, way back to when he was an assistant coach at Baylor. I'm really, really fond of him as a person. I was thrilled when he got the opportunity to lead a Big 12 program because I knew him when he was somebody who was literally trying to make a name for himself in this profession. If you want to part ways with him as a basketball coach because of what happened the last 2 years, Kansas State has every right to make that decision. But when you start trying to muddy the waters because of a buyout and you want to fire him with cause and try to find something out of thin air, that is a pattern that is becoming all too common in college basketball. And I'll put a bow on this before I get to the other disappointing headline from Sunday. I'll put a bow on this. One thing that I have seen in all my years covering college basketball, and one thing I think that definitely translates into the NIL era from the era that was pre-NIL. Once you lose momentum as a program, it is very difficult to get it back in college basketball. Kansas State had great momentum in 22-23. 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, Elite Eight appearance at Madison Square Garden, won a game in the Sweet 16 against Tom Izzo and Michigan State. The next year, Kansas State had an NCAA tournament team. It lost Naquan Tomlin. That team never got to the tournament. It then turned over its roster, missed the NCAA tournament, turned over its roster again, and now in mid-February, the Wildcats are looking for another head coach. In the press conference, Gene Taylor, the AD on Sunday night, said he's going to start by looking for somebody with head coaching experience. Everybody knows that these coaching searches over the next month, month and a half are going to revolve around a handful of mid-major coaches at the non-power conference level. St. Louis's Josh Schertz is going to be at the top of every list. Utah State's Jarrett Calhoun's going to be at the top of every list. You could also make an argument for George Mason's Tony Skinn. And don't forget about New Mexico's Eric Olin. But I'll say this. The way things are trending right now, we've got a long way to go before every job is going to be vacant on the coaching carousel. I am not seeing as many quality mid-major candidates as I did 10, 15 years ago, and I'm going to tell you why. We are seeing such a separation right now between the power conferences and the non-power conferences that it is becoming more difficult for mid-major coaches to retain personnel and be in a situation where they can put together a quality mid-major team. One storyline I think we should all keep an eye out for. Will there be more power conference jobs open than there are quality candidates for? We've seen a lot of schools in the last couple of years hire, because of the way things are going with the NIL model, hire people with professional experience. Luke Laux at Florida State, Alex Jensen at Utah. Wouldn't shock me if we see more of that in this coaching cycle. Now, the other disappointing thing that came across the wire on Sunday was the fact that BYU star Richie Saunders is going to miss the remainder of the 25-26 college basketball season due to a torn ACL. And this is just a heartbreaking, devastating piece of news. Saunders suffered the injury on Saturday against Colorado. This was somebody, as you see right there, that was last season's most improved player in the Big 12 Conference. This was somebody that went from role player to glue guy to all Big 12 first-team caliber player to dark horse All-American. And now Richie Saunders is not going to be able to finish his college career. This was not just a player that was a piece to BYU's puzzle. This was a guy who was one of the best wings in college basketball. 18-point-per-game scorer, made 64 threes entering Saturday's game against Colorado, shooting better than 37% from three. And if you've heard me the last couple of weeks talk about the stuff that was plaguing BYU, the biggest thing that I kept going to was the issues that the Cougars had with their depth. It's the same thing that I saw when I was in Provo during the preseason for practice, and it's the same thing now that is really going to be difficult to navigate moving forward. Because now, and again, in the last couple of weeks, I've spent a lot of time talking about how BYU did not have enough around Rob Wright, Richie Saunders, and A.J. DeBonsa. And now DeBonsa and Rob Wright are going to be keyed on even more with fewer people to pass the ball to. Dawson Baker was a big-time loss for BYU because he can make shots and space the floor. Richie Saunders is an irreplaceable piece. And now all of a sudden, the most anticipated season in the history of BYU basketball, because you have a talent like DeBonsa, you have a point guard like Rob Wright, and you had a linchpin in Richie Saunders back, the most anticipated season in BYU basketball history, barring something crazy right now, feels like it's going to be one of disappointment. Disappointment because of BYU's lack of resources after multiple injuries to key players in the rotation. Devastating news for the Cougars, devastating news for their fan base. BYU now shoulders, obviously, the brunt of the responsibility to try to make as much of it can of the remainder of the season. And what I mean by that is you are going to have to see, in my opinion, DeBonsa and also Rob Wright combine for 45 to 50 points on an annual basis if BYU is going to have a chance to compete with the top teams in this conference. Because the other teams at the top of the Big 12, Arizona, Houston, Iowa State, Texas Tech, Kansas, are all Final Four caliber teams. And I didn't think I'd be saying that about a month ago with the Jayhawks. Now, I want to end this segment with the negativity, because this is the last thing I want to talk about before we get into some of the positive things. What happened during the St. John's Providence game on Saturday, there is absolutely no place for. No place for. It was a headline for all the wrong reasons. The foul by Duncan Powell on Bryce Hopkins was the most egregious play that we have seen during the 25-26 season. The push on Zuby Ejiofor by Jameer Jones was ridiculous, uncalled for, and I could tell that Kim English, the Providence coach, to his credit, saw that right away when the play happened and ran out to the floor. But it was a terrible day for the optics surrounding Providence's program. And look, the facts are the facts. The big events over the last couple of years for Providence was when Ed Cooley came back as Georgetown's head coach and when Bryce Hopkins came back after he transferred from Providence to St. John's. But that was as egregious a turn of events as I have seen in all my years doing this. And I covered the brawl between Cincinnati and Xavier in 2012. Egregious. The Big East suspended Powell for 3 games. It was announced on Sunday. Wouldn't have shocked me if he got more, because that was, again, as bad of a scene as I have seen this season and maybe in my career doing this. There are some positives to get to. And obviously, we're going to stick with the Big 12. Houston has a major opportunity tonight to move the needle at Iowa State, but the Cougars also have other stuff coming down the pike. We'll get to that and more when we return. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein here on CBS Sports Network. The second big thing I want to get to today revolves around a couple of Big 12 storylines. And the first is Armageddon lies ahead for Houston. Now, Houston is in position to be a number one seed in the NCAA tournament for the fourth straight year under Kelvin Sampson. But over the next 7 days, Houston has, in my opinion, the craziest 7-day stretch that we have in the 25-26 college basketball season. Tonight, the Cougars will be in Ames at Hilton Coliseum to take on Iowa State, a team that easily beat Kansas on Saturday. Then Houston is going to come home to the Fertitta Center over the weekend, host Arizona, and then a 2-day turnaround to take on Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse. This is, again, in my opinion, the craziest 7-day stretch that any team has this season. Now, with that said, in addition to the quest to be a number one seed in the NCAA tournament, Houston is also going for its third straight Big 12 regular season title under Kelvin Sampson. Since Houston joined the conference under Kelvin Sampson, Houston is an unfathomable 45-5 in Big 12 regular season games. But one of the things you learn when you eat, drink, and sleep college basketball is if you want to go to the Final Four, you need to have things aligned perfectly. And I tell this story all the time. In 2008, I was doing an event at the Final Four in San Antonio with Denny Crum, former Louisville coach. And I asked him what were some of the keys to going to the Final Four and winning national championships. And he told me, number one, you have to be lucky. The second thing, you can't be unlucky. And for Houston this year, the Cougars are playing for something of greater significance, in my opinion, than past years, and that is a major geographical advantage in the NCAA tournament. That's because Houston, and I've talked about this in the past, and I'm going to continue to talk about it, but Houston, if it becomes a 1 seed, will be in the South region, and the regionals this year for the South region are at the Toyota Center in downtown Houston. Houston was supposed to be the host school in the South region. And after the Cougars had to go to Indianapolis and play Purdue last year in the Sweet 16, Eddie Nunez, the AD for Houston, made the decision to forfeit the right to be the host school in the South region. And now another school has taken over, and now the Cougars are eligible to play in a situation where they could play in the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight at the Toyota Center in downtown Houston. Now, why is this so important in my opinion? I think geography matters at the highest level in the NCAA tournament. Now, certain coaches can make arguments that it's better to go to the opposite way. UConn under Jim Calhoun went to the Final Four 4 times. In 99, 2004, 2001, and also 2009, UConn 4 times came out of the West region. Jay Wright had said at Villanova multiple times that Villanova, when it went to the Final Four in 2016, was better getting out of Philadelphia and going to Louisville. But you look at the other times Villanova went to a Final Four. In 2009, it was out of Boston, and in 2018, it was out of Boston. So there's arguments to be made for both sides. I look back when Syracuse won a national title, and I look back when Syracuse beat, ironically enough, Kelvin Sampson in Oklahoma in 2003 in Albany, and I felt that made all the difference. That was when I was starting to do this on this beat. Syracuse that year was Boston to Albany to the Final Four in New Orleans. It matters. And in my opinion, if you're looking at things right now for Houston, who as of today has 7 quad 1 victories, this 3-game stretch will determine whether or not the Cougars, who again could add more wins in the Big 12 tournament, but this 3-game stretch will determine, in my opinion, whether or not the Cougars will be a 1 seed on Selection Sunday. Houston, after the 3-game stretch that I just talked about, finishes the regular season with Colorado at home, with Baylor at home, and then a road game at Oklahoma State. And that game's on CBS on March the 7th. I would be very, very surprised if Houston lost any of those 3 final games. Now, Oklahoma State's a team on the bubble. They're going to be very desperate, but I would be surprised if Houston lost any of those games. So now, if we're looking at things from a 1-seed perspective, Michigan is clearly in position. I'm going to get to the Wolverines in the next segment. Michigan is clearly in position to be the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. Despite a couple of losses, Arizona is still in position. And then there's Duke and there's UConn, and now it feels like the 4-5 seeds in the NCAA tournament, the teams who are going for the 4th number 1 seed, is going to be UConn and Houston. And Houston can obviously change that dynamic coming up here over the next 7 days. Again, one more time, at Iowa State, home against Arizona, and then obviously Fog Allen Fieldhouse a week from Monday night. Cougars going for their 4th straight number 1 seed under Kelvin Sampson. Houston's 2 losses at Texas Tech and Tennessee on a neutral court. Speaking of Texas Tech, I don't know if it's an oversight or maybe it's an insult, but JT Toppin, the reigning Big 12 Player of the Year, may be underrated. And I bring that up because there has been such a focus, and for good reason, on this tremendous freshman class. And it's the deepest and it's the most talented freshman class that I have ever seen. But we are not spending enough time on a nightly and a daily basis highlighting what JT Toppin is doing. You see the line right there, 31-13 on Saturday against Arizona, a road win for the Red Raiders in what, in my opinion, was as good of a college game as you're going to see. This guy is averaging 22-11. This guy is putting up video game-like numbers. In his last 2 games, he's got 47 points and 31 rebounds. And this is another example of why name, image, and likeness is great for college sports. JT Toppin was in a position last year where he was not in line to be a top pick in the 2025 NBA draft. So he got a lucrative deal for over $4 million a year to come back to Texas Tech, and now he is thriving at the highest level. Now, I asked Grant McCasland about this when we had him on a couple of weeks ago on here on Inside College Basketball Now, and I think it's a major, major thing to look at when we're talking about the offseason and things moving forward. Texas Tech should be doing everything it can to get JT Toppin back for next season. Because as of now, JT Toppin is going to be projected, again, as of now, as a late first-round pick. He stands to make significantly more money next season in college basketball than he would if he went to the NBA. And he's also now performing at a level in multiple years, back-to-back, where he is at a place where his jersey could very well hang in the rafters at United Supermarkets Arena. These are things that the GMs and the people in college basketball are working on a daily basis, and there is no bigger priority for Texas Tech to keep JT Toppin. I don't know if they'll be able to keep Christian Anderson as well, the other All-American player for Texas Tech, but Texas Tech now has a resume where it is also another team that's climbing the seed lines. Texas Tech has beaten Houston. Texas Tech has beaten Duke at Madison Square Garden, and Texas Tech has won a road game at Arizona, the only team to beat Arizona on its home floor this season. You're disappointed about Richie Saunders, obviously, in BYU. But I think now when you look at the state of the Big 12 at the top, Houston, Iowa State, Arizona, Texas Tech, Kansas, if you are Brett Yormark, who has breathed fire into this league and has invigorated the conference, it's cutting edge, it's hip, everything seems like it's on the uptick. This is a guy who got Arizona and the Four Corners schools to come in through realignment. If you are the Big 12 and you have this type of firepower, I know the goal for any league is to have a national champion, and there's a lot of teams at the top of the Big Ten as well that could go far in the NCAA tournament and produce a national champion. But if you are the Big 12, this is the type of season where you can separate yourself by having multiple teams from this league in the Final Four. And I think there's more than a puncher's chance that that's going to happen. Because I think when you look right now at the seeds, Houston, Arizona, Iowa State would unequivocally be 3 of the top 8 seeds in the NCAA tournament. And Kansas and Texas Tech right now in that position to be on the 3 line. We're all building up to 27 days from now on Selection Sunday, but there's a lot to get to between now and then. And the team that's going to be at the focal point of all of that is the Michigan Wolverines. Why is Michigan's week ahead so pivotal for Dusty May and company? I'll talk about it when we return. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. The third big thing I want to get to is revolving around the number 1 team in college basketball, clearly the team with the best roster, and as the Michigan Wolverines. And Michigan has a massive week, and this is the type of week where Michigan, who in my opinion has separated itself as the best team in the sport, can continue to separate itself and, in my opinion, lock up the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. Michigan, as we look at the recap from Saturday on CBS, dominated UCLA in the second half. It was a close first half. It was a 2-point game at the half. I was in studio on CBS with Wally Zerbiak and Adam Zucker. Michigan wins the game 86-56. Michigan has won 24 games this season. They're 24-1. 10 of those wins for the Wolverines have come by 30 or more points. Michigan has turned roughly 40% of its wins into bye games regardless of the competition. UCLA went to Ann Arbor, lost by 30. USC went to Ann Arbor, lost by 30. Gonzaga played Michigan in Las Vegas. It felt like they lost by 80. It has been a constant occurrence for Michigan, who now has about as big of a 2-game stretch as it will have this season, unless it goes to a Final Four, then plays for a national championship. Michigan, on Tuesday night at Mackey Arena, is going to play Purdue, who's playing some of its best basketball of the season, won 4 in a row. And then Michigan, on Saturday, is going to go to Washington, D.C. for a non-conference game against Duke. Now, this is the type of 2-game stretch, in my opinion, that is comparable to playing in a national semifinal on Saturday and then playing in a national championship game on a Monday night. And there are different storylines that emerge throughout a season. For Michigan, obviously, a major storyline was going to be the balance. For Michigan, obviously, a major storyline was going to be the front line and what that did for the Wolverines' 2-point defense with Lendeborg, with Johnson, with Mara. Another storyline that is emerging, and I've talked at length about Michigan's bench and how good those 4 players are off the bench. One of those 4 players is L.J. Kaysen. And L.J. Kaysen now has separated himself as the best backup point guard in college basketball. Over the last 4 games, L.J. Kaysen is averaging about 13 points and 3.5 assists. And as I said last week, if there was one reason for concern for Michigan, it was Elliot Cadeau's lack of ball security at point guard. Now Dusty May has 2 options. Because the way Kaysen is playing right now, he is putting pressure on Elliot Cadeau to stay on the floor, because you have essentially another starter at the most important position in basketball to back up Elliot Cadeau. And the thing that, again, really stands out to me is just Michigan's physicality. Because it's almost like trying to stay with a heavyweight champ for 12 rounds. You might be able to hang in there for 6 or 7, but after a while, the punching power is going to wear you out. UCLA, in the first half on Saturday on CBS, went blow to blow with Michigan, did not back down. It was 40-38 at the half. Trent Perry was playing great. And then in the second half, what we saw was straight domination. 46-18 in the second half in favor of Michigan. Michigan also does not, in my opinion, have its stars producing statistically at the same level as some of the other teams who possess the best players in college basketball, because so many of these games are blowouts. But right now, in the shadows, Yaxel Lendeborg is starting to play some of his best basketball of the season. He got to the foul line at will against UCLA. He was also in a situation where he's rebounding the ball exceptionally well. In his last 5 games, Yaxel Lendeborg is averaging 15.6 points per game, 10.6 rebounds per game, 3 assists, 2 blocks. He will be a first or second team All-American. And I have seen this team so many times. The last 2 weekends they've been on CBS. Again, they're going to be at Purdue Tuesday night, and they're also going to be against Duke on Saturday in Washington, D.C. Wisconsin had to make 15 threes to beat Michigan when it won in Ann Arbor. And the game was won by 3 points by the Badgers. I'm not saying a team is going to have to make 15 threes to have a chance to beat Michigan, but you are going to have to make 10. No team is going to have a chance to beat Michigan if you make fewer than 10 3-point shots. And if you are the Wolverines and you are in a scenario now where you obviously are flawless in your quad one opportunities, you have a chance, in my opinion, this week to really start to separate yourself and cement your place as the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. I looked up the logistics from a travel perspective for first-round sites because you always play at the closest site. Buffalo is closer to Michigan and Ann Arbor than St. Louis, so Michigan could start in Buffalo, and then it's all about obviously playing the Midwest Regionals in Chicago during the second weekend, which would be in the neighborhood of 4 hours from Ann Arbor. But if you know one thing, obviously, about Big Ten geography, you know that there is an insane amount of Michigan alums in the Chicago area that would love to see this team at the United Center. Michigan, in addition to this week against Purdue at Mackey, against Duke in Washington, D.C., is also, during the regular season, going to play a road game at Illinois in a couple of weeks. That's the end of next week. And also play another home game against Michigan State. So there's still a plethora of opportunities, but I think Michigan can distance itself this week against Purdue and against Duke in being the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Michigan also has not always been a 1 seed with regularity in the NCAA tournament. I'm thinking about it now in my lifetime. Michigan was a 1 seed in Juwan Howard's second year in 2021 in the bubble. Ironically enough, lost to UCLA in the Elite Eight. Michigan was a 1 seed in 1993 under Steve Fisher when they went to the national title game and lost to North Carolina. But John Beilein had 2 appearances in the national championship game at Michigan. One was as a 5 seed, one was as a 3 seed. So this Michigan team right now, with the way it's playing, will go into the NCAA tournament with as much expectations and as much fanfare as the team in 93 with the Fab Five when they were sophomores. If you remember, Rose, Jimmy King, Ray Jackson, Chris Webber, Juwan Howard. That team, that core of guys, went to the national title game twice. In 92 as a 6 seed, Michigan lost 71-51 to Duke in Minneapolis. And then as a 1 seed in 93 when they were sophomores, lost to Carolina and New Orleans 77-71. So that is going to be Michigan's, calling card in terms of the cachet that it's going to go into the NCAA tournament with. Now, other things I want to point out as we see the CBS bracketology right there, headlines. Wisconsin is the only team to beat Michigan. Wisconsin is coming at a really, really high level. Wisconsin is getting elite backcourt play from Nick Boyd, from John Blackwell. Wisconsin is a team that has been completely different in 2026, and this is another team in the Big Ten. I think if you're looking at this conference, and Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Illinois, Nebraska have separated themselves the whole season, Wisconsin is now playing at a level that they should start to be mentioned as the 6th team in this league that can obviously perform at a high level. There's a lot of basketball still to be played. Big Ten, though, still in really good shape to get 10 teams in the NCAA tournament. We'll see if we can get more than that here down the stretch. When we return, we are going to take a look, as we do every Monday, at this week's AP Top 25. I will have my own thoughts and reactions. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. Time now to get set with our Rothstein reaction. We are going to take a look, as always, at this week's AP Top 25. So let's have at it right now, just freshly hot off the press. Number 1, Michigan. Number 2, Houston. Number 3, Duke. 4, Arizona. 5, UConn. I have UConn still in the 2-hole. I want to point out UConn has 2 losses. One of those losses, a close home loss to Arizona, came when UConn did not have Braylon Mullins, did not have Tarris Reed. I took that into account. So I have UConn at 2 and Houston at 4, Arizona at 5, but I have the same 5 teams, obviously, in the mix. I also have Iowa State and Purdue at 6 and 7, so I'm okay with that. I just get my rationale for the top 7. Let's go now to the next page. Kansas, Nebraska, Illinois. I have Kansas, Nebraska, Illinois, but I actually have Florida higher here, and I also have Illinois above Nebraska because Illinois won head-to-head. Gonzaga is at 11. I have Gonzaga more towards 15. Texas Tech's at 13. I have Texas Tech at 12. Virginia at 14. I have Virginia a little bit lower in the polls at 17. Let's keep going. Michigan State at 15, Carolina at 16, don't hate that. St. John's at 17, St. Louis up to 18, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Louisville. This is somewhat comparable to what I have. Texas Tech I had a little bit higher than they had, but okay, I'm okay with this. You can keep going. Miami, Ohio, 22, BYU, 23, Wisconsin, and then Alabama. I am surprised that Clemson dropped out for a road loss at Duke. That's a little bit unfathomable and inconceivable to me. Miami, Ohio, I decided to take out in favor of Wisconsin in my rankings this week because I felt that with Wisconsin's wins, it should have been a bit higher. I am shocked right now that Clemson dropped out for losing a road game at Cameron Indoor Stadium. That makes about as much sense to me as... Oh, my God, I can't believe Clemson dropped out for losing at Cameron Indoor Stadium. I mean, they did lose as well, obviously, to Virginia Tech at home, but I thought the drop where I had Clemson was maybe put them in a place where they were in the low to high 20s, but I did not want to drop Clemson that far for those 2 losses, but to drop them out completely, a little bit surprised. I had to write last week that Brad Brownell was pushing for ACC Coach of the Year honors. Might have done the jinx to the Clemson Tigers at Little John. We'll put a bow on this one when we return with some news and notes from around the world of college basketball. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein here on CBS Sports Network. Want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We're the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now, and we need you to be all you can be. And also a reminder from a programming perspective, on Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern, Inside College Basketball Now will be coming to you with live episodes at 1 o'clock Eastern. The Monday edition of those shows will be live right here on CBS Sports Network. And if you can't be with us at 1 o'clock Eastern, get with us on Apple or Spotify during a commute home or during your early morning workout. And remember, in addition to those 2 shows, Inside College Basketball Now will be bringing you exclusive additional episodes each week with interviews featuring the biggest and best names in the sport. Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern on YouTube, I catch up with Tennessee head coach Rick Barnes. But time now to get some news and notes from around the world of college basketball. Let's start with 3 good nuggets. Nugget number 1, burgeoning Badgers. Wisconsin, since since losing to Villanova in December, is 11-3. The 3 losses for the Badgers during that span: Purdue at home, USC, and at Indiana. Those last 2 losses, Indiana and USC, came by a combined 3 points, and the loss at Indiana was in overtime. Nugget number 2, urban legend. I'm talking about Florida's Urban Klobuchar. When Klobuchar scores in double figures this season, the Gators are a whopping 12-2. This is an unsung piece to monitor in Gainesville, and maybe, just maybe, the X factor to the Gators getting to a second straight Final Four. Nugget number 3, the darling of the Big East. I'm talking about St. John's point guard Dylan Darling. This guy has come on extremely strong over the last couple of weeks. In Dylan Darling's last 3 games, he is averaging 15.3 points per game, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. St. John's is rolling at an extremely high level. The Red Storm will take on Marquette on Wednesday. Then they will obviously come home to play Creighton. The Marquette game is in Milwaukee. And then on February the 25th, 1 week from tomorrow, we will have the rematch in Hartford between St. John's and UConn. Red Storm right now control their own destiny for a Big East regular season title. Up until last year, St. John's had not won a Big East regular season title outright since 1985. Let's get to some games to watch right now. 5 of them for this week. And again, our games to watch go from now until we get back behind this microphone on Thursday. Obviously, you see tonight the heavyweight showdown at Hilton Coliseum, Houston at Iowa State. Tuesday, a Final Four type game at Mackey Arena, Michigan against Purdue. Wednesday, Arkansas at Alabama. I can't say enough about Arkansas freshman point guard Darius Acuff playing like the best freshman point guard that John Calipari has ever coached. Wednesday, BYU is at Arizona. This is the first time since that the Cougars will play after the news came out about Richie Saunders being done for the year with an injury. And then Wednesday, Kansas at Oklahoma State. A huge opportunity for Steve Lutz and Oklahoma State, who are trying to play their way into the NCAA tournament. Now let's go to 5 under-the-radar games over the next couple of days. Tuesday night, Miami, Ohio, 25-0 is in Amherst to take on Frank Martin and UMass. UMass has been out of the national spotlight for a while, but this is a major opportunity to make a major statement. Louisville is at SMU on Tuesday night. Michael Brown on a ridiculous run over the last couple of games. SMU, though, has an underrated backcourt in Boopie Miller and Jerome Pierre. UCLA at Michigan State Tuesday night, a homecoming for Xavier Booker. Bruins right now in the field, but need to win some of their next couple of games to cement the bid. UCLA has this game at Michigan State on Tuesday, and then still has games at home against Illinois and Nebraska. So the Bruins have opportunities, but they got to cash in on those opportunities to be playing in March Madness. Tuesday, we got Nebraska at Iowa, and then Wednesday night, Illinois, part of a West Coast trip, is at USC. Illinois playing great basketball right now under Brad Underwood, another team out of the Big Ten that can unequivocally get to a Final Four. So this is the time that college basketball is obviously in the spotlight. A slew of great games. The heavyweight showdown in Ames tonight between Houston and Iowa State is the focus of obviously tonight's slate. Syracuse also plays against Duke. Syracuse had a nice week last week beating Cal and SMU at home. But the Orange could obviously make a major statement. Duke is 6-2 against Syracuse at Cameron Indoor Stadium since the Orange joined the ACC. Want to remind everybody that my chat with Tennessee head coach Rick Barnes will be live on my socials and also live on YouTube Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock Eastern. We will be back later in the week. Same bat time, same bat channel. This was Inside College Basketball Now on CBS Sports Network with Jon Rothstein.